everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of Cinemetropolis.com. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and we are back again with another Dead Center interview today. Now, I'm actually really excited about today's interview because we'll be speaking with the Director of Technology at Dead Center, Steven Tyler. He's also the founder of Mostly Harmless Media here in Oklahoma. They offer a bunch of stuff, including podcasts, so if you're listening, you might want to check out their website there. We have been friends and adjacent affiliates over the years, so always a pleasure to speak with Steven. Steven Tyler, welcome to the Cinematic Schematic.
Thanks for having me here.
So, Steven, just for listeners out there, I want to start by really understanding exactly what is the normal, quote-unquote, role of Director of Technology play in a film festival?
Yeah, at least for Dead Center, what my role kind of started as was helping take the pass system online to something digital that could be tracked, that could be scanned, that could do some more. And that's how I kind of started with Dead Center it's probably 5 years ago. We started on that 6 years ago. And ultimately, once we kind of did that, they saw I had other abilities and I had other interests to continue help promoting the festival and help making sure it executed well every year. So that ultimately grew to this Director of Technology position, which in the normal landscape of a film festival, I'm overseeing things like making sure that same pass system that we implemented is online and running, and everybody's buying their passes, and scanners are working at events and those sorts of things. But I think the real important part for me with the technology piece of Dead Center is making sure the films are received and delivered to their proper places and proper times, whether that's thumb drives being sent to the library for a kid showcase, or encrypted DCP drives coming from major studios going to Harkins and being ingested and tested and all that stuff. It's quite a lot when you think about Dead Center averaging over 100 films every year actually being screened. So that is a lot of files coming and going. It's a lot of schedule coordination. It's a lot of different destinations that all those things go to, and they all have different formats and requirements. So it's a big balancing act of that. And those were kind of the two main areas. It really came to festival operations, was more of the technology stuff. And then as I really solidified a couple of years ago as a sort of recurring staff member, I kind of stay on throughout the year just to help Dead Center with its year-round programming. And then probably about 2 years ago, the real big thing that was added to my plate was I started to be involved with the Tech Center, which is where we hosted our virtual cinema, not to be confused with our virtual festival this year. Virtual has a whole new meaning to that word now, but that was where we not only partnered with local technology companies that were related to film in some way, whether they were Boeing using drones to film things, or film to train, or VR to do new trainings, or whether it was like a local, for the life of me, I cannot remember the name of it now. I'm in the middle of festival brain, so you have to forgive me. But last year we had a group of kids who developed this application that was augmented reality through a wristband. I think it's called Wrist World. I could be getting that wrong, and that's horrible, but I'm forgetting. But and so then I started really doing virtual reality and extended reality stuff, where we were going to South by and finding those films and getting submissions ourselves and entering that realm. So normally my technology scope is very much about presenting the content to people. Just in the physical world, or in that case, the virtual reality world, which was still very physical, bringing people into 21C where we would do that, having headsets ready and prepared, and having these, experiences ready. So I kind of had a pretty wide swath of oversight on anything that basically plugged in and turned on. Like at some point or not, I would get a text during the festival of like, hey, my laptop won't charge, to, hey, the big premiere screening Friday night at Harkins is messed up. We need you to run over here.
So it sounds like you're really a jack of all trades in tech, and in a lot of ways, extremely integral to the success of making sure all these films played. Now, one thing you mentioned there was making sure the films and the content are where they need to be, which, again, physical location, you're talking about the DCPs and like those thumb drives, but this year, everything's gone virtual. So can you talk with me a little about how your process has differed this year?
Yeah, it differed somewhat, but ultimately not so much, except that most of my job I could do this year from within one building. As long as I had access to the internet and had power, I could do my job. But we were lucky enough, so it's kind of funny, we come full circle to the platform we adopted ultimately for our pass sales. The thing that I first came to the festival to kind of help with was this platform called Eventive. They were very young when we adopted them. I think we were maybe their second or third film festival. It's a father-son team who, once again, Festival Brand, I cannot remember. They used to run a film festival up north. For the life of me, I can't remember the name of it. But they built this platform as something that they needed from their experience running a film festival, saying, we need a better pass system. We need all these things, sponsor, being able to deal with sponsors, being able to deal with one-off passes, being able to deal with scan tickets. So when the very early stages of the conversation about the festival going virtual this year started happening, we got an email from Eventive saying, hey, we have a solution for this. And we were kind of like, oh, we just started to think about it. And so it's pretty amazing. Eventive partnered with another company called Cinesend. And what's interestingly enough, Cinesend was a company I was looking at for a new delivery system for filmmakers to send us files for the normal festival. So they partnered together and launched this virtual festival platform. So immediately we had our pass and sales and ticketing system directly integrated with a film delivery system that was MPAA certified and approved encryption and all of these things we weren't thinking about asking or being asked when we started to think about virtual festival. They basically just popped in our email and said, hey, we have the solution already. So what's changed is that it's really just all been about making sure films are being sent in, making sure they're in the right places. We did a couple of small outdoor public events that we could do in large spaces that were socially distanced properly. So we still did a little tease of the Dead Center normalcy. So not a lot changed, except, like I said, I can do all of this. We decided to headquarter at Tower Theater because I had systems here and I have, fiber optic internet here, and I have all these things that really mattered for us executing a proper virtual festival. So really, instead of running around downtown Oklahoma City like crazy in the 99-degree heat, I was able to run around the air-conditioned hallways of Tower Theater, just bounce between rooms and make sure things were going off on schedule. So it kind of felt the same to me for the most part in terms of the sort of pacing and stress and we were releasing things on time. Certain films had limited runs and limited show time. So we still had those same elements of you've got to get there, you've got to reserve your ticket, you've got to show up on time, even if that means you're at your house on your couch. You still had the same sort of sense of urgency elements. So for me, it honestly feels very similar. Just I didn't sweat as much.
In making this transition, what would you say some of your biggest challenges were?
I think the biggest challenges were just kind of understanding how we could take something like Dead Center, because obviously Dead Center is about films and it's about curating an amazing selection of films. But Dead Center is also so much about the experience of people getting together. And like I said, those senses of urgency of oh my gosh, I only have one or two chances to see this film. I got to get my ticket. I got to go line up at Harkins or whatever. I think that was the biggest thing I was curious about, is how we were going to instill some of those true Dead Center elements into something that was entirely non-physical. Because everybody knows you almost come to Dead Center as much for the parties as you do the films. But it was interesting to see how Lance and the rest of the team kind of shifted their way of thinking and just really ramped up the content that we were creating. Really, I mean, Dead Center's never really created a lot of content during the festival. It creates a recap video and some daily updates and stuff like that. But really, that's maybe an hour's worth of total edited product. Whereas we have produced, I need to sit down and add this up, but I would say something over 100 additional hours of content online. I mean, if you think about, we did Q&As and interviews with a big chunk of filmmakers. We actually were in pre-production all last week, shooting more content to be added to the platform. So you still got those elements of you go to the festival not only to experience a film maybe you'd never see before or maybe never see again, but you also had the opportunity to hear that filmmaker speak, or to maybe talk to that filmmaker at a party, the distribution forms. So that was really, I think, the challenge. And I didn't end up having to be the one ultimately to come up with the idea of how to solve that, as much as I had to come up with the solution of how to execute the ideas they had. But the team did a really great job of that. I mean, we produced bonus features for the vast majority of the films that came to Dead Center. So that's really been, I think, the biggest shift for us, is we went from presenting everyone else's content to presenting everyone else's content with the add-on of our own content to fill that empty space of, you know, why come to Dead Center and try to watch Billy when I'm sure Billy is going to be on streaming platforms in a few weeks, you know, or a few months. I'm sure it's going to get distribution if it doesn't have it already. But what you get with Dead Center is you get obviously that advanced screening, plus now there's additional content for those things that isn't going to exist anywhere else. It's only going to be here. So it's still a unique experience for Dead Center.
Yeah, very cool. It's almost like it reminds me of the Blu-ray special features of old when they still did special features. You know, you get the post Q&A that would play immediately afterwards, and I know some of the films had more than one additional piece of content afterwards. So I mean, I think that's a really exciting thing you guys have put together there. Of course, I want to say as we begin to wind down, congratulations on a successful festival, and congratulations on pivoting all the technology to the virtual platform. So kudos to you guys, everyone at the Dead Center team. For you, where can people keep up with you and your work online, either throughout the festival or just any time of the year?
Most of the time of the year, or in any downtimes, you find me on Twitter as of late. That's been my real stomping grounds for any sort of social media interaction. At Steven Tyler on Twitter. That's my name with no E's, STPHNTYLR. Like you mentioned in the top, they can visit mostlyharmless.media website. We've helped produce a ton of podcasts and content in the area. We've produced a couple of short films. We've done random things throughout the year, some corporate videos for people, and all of our content lives there. So you can kind of keep up to date with what's going on there. And then rest of my time I'm spent at Tower Theater. So if you're a fan of the Tower or a fan of the concerts or movies or any of that kind of stuff, we are currently still closed under pandemic conditions, but we are strategizing about how we can safely reopen in the very near future. So any one of those ways, I'm usually around and vocal and open to conversations.
Very cool. Well, Steven, thanks so much for joining us today. Lastly, as we close, is there anything else you'd like to add for listeners or attendees of Dead Center before we close?
Yeah, we've gotten some pretty good feedback from the festival goers so far, but that helps us. This is, as much as I said, Eventive is a completely awesome platform that kind of answered all the problems for us before we even had them. There's still a lot of things to learn, and they're a very responsive company. So feedback for us is super important, especially as we look forward into the future of maybe having a physical festival again. We think there's now space and understanding for something virtual to live on alongside it, and trying to identify like what has been people's, favorite thing, what's the worst thing, what was the biggest thing you had. If you go to our website, there's a chat bubble in the right-hand corner right now through the festival. Message in that I pop up and say hello through the little auto bot thing. But if you respond to that does actually come straight to me. So if you're having an issue or you just have an idea or a frustration or feature request or something like that, we're totally open to those things because, like I said, we do see a future in this virtual space, even when the physical festival resumes. So curious how we can make it better for everybody. Beyond that, don't sleep. We've had a couple of our limited run only films already fall off. So hopefully you caught things like Shifter and Billy and before they fell away. But if not, make sure you check out the schedule and just stay on top of anything that might be going away soon.
Yeah, very cool. All right. Well, Steven Tyler, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
And for listeners out there, you can find more of our interviews covering the Dead Center 2020 Film Festival over at dCinematropolis.com. And you can hit us up on Facebook at facebook.com/dCinematropolis or on Twitter at dCinematrop. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you again next time.